What is going on, guys? It is Wrestlegamia here, back with another video. Now, if you've been following this channel for any length of time, then you'll probably have heard us talk about how much we loved playing General Manager mode on the older WWE games. You've probably also heard us talk about how much we wish this feature would make a return, and when you know it, it's exactly why we're here today, to do a deep dive into this ever popular game mode as we look at what made it great, why it was removed, and why it's so important to the franchise now more than ever. So be sure to subscribe and click on that notification bell, because today we're looking at what happened to GM mode. General Manager mode was first introduced in the release of SmackDown vs. Raw 2006. It allowed gamers to act out their fantasies of being the GM of either Raw or SmackDown with all the managerial responsibilities that this entailed, and it felt similar to other managing simulators like Total Extreme Wrestling or Football Manager, albeit less in depth as those were standalone games. This was just a mode after all. Players would start off by taking part in the WWE draft, choosing their top superstars, and then kind of being disappointed that they were left with either Doug Basham, Rob Conway and Joy Giovanni. But anyway, disappointment aside, from there they would be left in charge of everything from hiring and firing members of the roster, booking matches, establishing rivalries, all the way to managing finances, contracts and anything else that could help win fan support for your brand. There were also additional purchases you could make to unlock characters or storylines that could be used to draw further interest in your show. Of course, there was always tactics involved in having the best show, but also managing your finances, as you couldn't always have a Hell in a Cell match on Raw every Monday night as it would cost too much. So you would have to see which wrestlers had chemistry together to bring out the best rivalry, or indeed 5-star matches. Again, you couldn't put on The Rock every night in Iron Man matches, even though it didn't cost much to do it, but having your top superstar work Iron Man matches didn't help with his fatigue, meaning if his fatigue grew higher, then he would be prone to injury and out for a number of weeks or even months. This would be a great detriment to your brand. Of course, the ultimate goal was to have the better brand than your competitor by winning the most fans. The superior GM would then win the General Manager of the Year award from Vince McMahon himself during the game's climax at WrestleMania.
You know what happens with undesirable cargo, don't you? It's jettisoned. So I've decided you were successful enough to stay on board. Congratulations! You are the General Manager of the Year. Looks like you get to hold on to your job for now. Now get the hell out of my sight before I change my mind.
It wasn't exactly the WWE Championship, but still a nice reward for that hard work and proof that you could still book a better show than Vince Russo in TNA. General Manager mode was immediately popular with fans, and in 2007 it returned without much change. However, when it came back again a year after that in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008, it looked different than it had been before. The first change fans noticed this time around was that the company's third brand ECW was now included. Now this made perfect sense since the ECW brand had been revived in real life, airing on Sci-Fi every week. The bigger change though was that the GM mode had now been combined with the season mode to create WWE 24/7 mode, which amongst the usual features you would expect to find also allowed players to guide wrestlers through training, make special appearances, or do a host of other actions in between matches during the calendar year. The main goal of becoming the superior general manager of that year was still in place, and you would receive the illustrious trophy as well as the usual special bonus in the post-WrestleMania draft. Now the reaction to this change was mixed, with some liking how they got the best of both game modes in one package, and some preferring them to be separate. Well, it seems someone who wasn't happy with the game mode was THQ themselves. When SmackDown vs. Raw 2009 hit the shelves, fans were shocked to find that General Manager mode, or anything even bearing a passing resemblance to it, had been completely removed. Hope was kept alive that this would only be an issue affecting that particular title, and that it would make a return with the 2010 edition, but when that was released with no sign of it still, many people's worst fears came true, and GM mode has not been seen since. It's impossible to understate just how fun it was for many of us to play through these games as the general manager of our own show, and how much replay value it added. For the statisticians out there, you could spend hours getting lost in the finances and contracts, and for those who weren't so much interested in the fine details, and let's be honest, what wrestling fan hasn't played Armchair Booker at some point in their lives? It was a fine balancing act that had to be maintained by keeping both fans happy with your product, while also keeping talent satisfied, and really made you feel like you were running the show and having to deal with all the egos involved. It gave the game a whole new flavor, and it kept it alive long after you got bored of fighting your opponents in one-on-one matches. So why was it removed then? Well, there has been a lot of speculation about this. One reason could be that while it was very popular with a section of the fan base, there was another portion who just didn't like it. Some complained that it was boring to play, with getting bogged down into things like contractual negotiations and money management. These fans complained that they wanted to play a wrestling game, not a management simulation. These criticisms are valid, of course, and nothing is ever going to be liked by everyone. However, it's been suggested that with only a minority portion of gamers disliking the game mode, this wouldn't be enough to explain why it was removed from future titles. Another explanation that has been touted as a possibility has to do with the size of the game's rosters in recent installments, which has swelled to hundreds of playable characters and only seems to be getting bigger with each passing year. Some have suggested that this would make a general manager mode too sprawling and large to realistically play, as you would have to deal with a gargantuan roster while at the same time competing with Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and possibly 205 Live or NXT UK as well, depending on what brand you chose. For some, this would be too much work, especially for those who didn't like it in the first place. It would also require a lot more programming from the developers, who have arguably gotten pretty lazy when it comes to releasing what often feels like a copy and pasted game with an updated roster every year. Whatever's behind the true reason, it hasn't stopped fans from begging for GM mode's return for over a decade now, and though this has mostly fallen on deaf ears, there have been slivers of hope that suggested 2K might be listening after all, and may even be considering bringing it back. As the years have gone on, the developers have toyed with introducing various new and different game modes, such as bringing back the likes of story mode or adding universe mode into the mix. Perhaps this is a way of gently easing themselves back into it, reintegrating a full-on general manager mode by slowly working their way up to it. Is it wishful thinking? It's a possibility for sure, but it's a theory that many believe regardless, or at least one they want to believe. Noted gaming enthusiast and New Day member Xavier Woods even got fans' hearts racing last year when he suggested that he had some insider knowledge as it pertained to GM mode's return. Woods, evidently a fan of the feature too, cryptically tweeted out on August 5th, 2019, "To those of you asking about GM mode, give me 2-3 months and I'll be able to hopefully give you some good news." Many of course took this as a sign that Xavier had some additional sway when it came to this kind of thing, which would make some amount of sense given how popular his YouTube gaming channel Up Up Down Down is, and that he was going to use this to make sure that general manager mode returned in time for WWE 2K20. This however turned out to be false. When 2K20 hit the shelves without a GM mode, fans were once again extremely disappointed. However, this was the least of the game's worries, to be honest, given the myriad of issues it had to deal with. And this ties directly into the question we set out to answer at the start of this video. Why is General Manager Mode such a desired feature for fans to see return, and why is it so important that it return now more than ever? Well, the simple answer to this is that fans have been disappointed with a lot of the more recent entries in the WWE 2K series. For as much bad press as 2K20 got, the last few years haven't exactly seen the games garnering rave reviews. In fact, consensus seems that they've been growing pretty stale for some time. What better way than to fresh up the franchise again than by giving it an injection of something new gameplay-wise while also playing to the nostalgia of older fans? This has only made more sense since the return of the brand split in 2016. It is also important to recognize, given how bad of a position the franchise is in right now, with fan trust at an all-time low, sales crumbling, reviews being awful, and the reputation of the development team in tatters, what do they have to lose by throwing a Hail Mary and seeing if the return of this once popular feature would help entice some players back to the fold? Because more than anything else, that's what they're going to do right now. They might be able to make a decent game next year, but they still have to convince people that it's worth parting with their money, and GM mode would be a great way of doing so. With all that said, will it come back? The answer to that is we simply don't know. It would have made sense for 2K to have revived this one years ago given the fan demand, but they haven't shown any real interest in doing so, even when WWE wrestlers are pitching on Twitter for it. Maybe now that the series is in the state that it's in, it will entice them to finally pull the trigger, but we suspect that their focus is going to be on making 2K21 a glitch-free game. Now, we're not saying that this is necessarily the right attitude to have, but it's the way big companies like this with millions on the line often think about things. One more suggestion that comes from fans online is that rather than adding GM mode into 2K21, they could instead include it as additional DLC option, something we know they love doing. This way they don't have to have it rushed out at the same time as the base game's release, and they can make a bit of extra money off it in the process. This would also solve the problem of fans who don't like playing it before, as they simply wouldn't have to bother buying it. For those who do, they likely won't mind shelling out some extra cash for this, and it would make for some worthwhile DLC for a change rather than the usual roster of extra characters that should be in the base game already that we usually get. We can only wait and see what 2K do going forward and hope that they make decisions that benefit the franchise in the long run. But there you have it guys, our look at General Manager mode and what happened to it. Would you like to see General Manager mode make a return in 2K21? Let us know in the comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling video game content.